So good for us to be able to share some time this afternoon and for us to start this journey through our new series, Heaven is a Place on Earth, or looking at the idea of the kingdom of heaven. It's one of those ideas which is so prevalent in the teaching of Jesus. What is a kingdom? I think we've seen some just quite extraordinary scenes over the past week in terms of what does it mean to be a nation. We've seen the scenes in America where it seems as though that society is really creaking to try to understand what does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be British? Right across the world, we are struggling to understand what does it mean to belong, to have that sense of togetherness, to be part of. If Jesus talks about a kingdom, he's talking about that very same idea, that sense of belonging, that sense of coming under a leadership and a rule. And he's saying that the kingdom of heaven, as he describes in many occasions, is near, it's here, it's to come. It's this strange kind of multifaceted idea of the kingdom. And so we want to spend a few weeks just thinking about the ways in which Jesus describes the kingdom. One of the overwhelming messages, I think, of the kingdom, and really to start us off on this, is it is astounding grace that we might be part of that kingdom. I've seen one reminder reading a book this past week, which pointed me to another reminder in the Bible of what it is to belong by grace to the kingdom of heaven. Ironically, it was reading Barack Obama's autobiography who prompted me to think of the astounding grace of the kingdom. He describes a moment where he sat at one of the many inauguration dinners after he'd been voted to be president of the United States. And he said that as he was sat in this amazing place with an incredible setting, astounding food, he looked across the room and he caught sight of his father's Kenyan mother, who was sat at the table eating. He really didn't know his father that well, it seems, and I don't know how the connection came about, but somehow his grandmother on his father's side was sat at this table. I don't know how uncomfortable she was, eating this incredible food, and he said that he stepped back and saw this grandmother sat feasting with cutlery and crockery that was reserved for leaders and kings and queens, and just reflecting on the idea that this grandmother had been brought to America from her shack in Kenya with a tin roof and no running water. What a contrast. It reminded me of a picture in the Old Testament in the book of Samuel, a man called Mephibosheth, who is related to King Saul. King David has taken rule after King Saul has tried to kill him. And against all of the cultural norms, David sought out Mephibosheth, who had become lame by breaking both of the ankles or some problem in the ankles or the feet when he had been carried away on fear of the family being killed. And Mephibosheth had been found, and Mephibosheth was invited against all of the cultural norms which would say that David would wipe out all of the descendant line of the previous threat. Mephibosheth, we read in 2 Samuel 9:13, lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. What an incredible picture of the grace of the kingdom that picture of David and Mephibosheth prepares us for the idea that we might be part of the kingdom of heaven, that we might be, if you like, ushered in, broken, unworthy, poor, brought to a table of astounding privilege to feast with the King. That's what it means for us to be part of the kingdom of heaven, and what a privilege it is. And so we want to just begin by looking at the way Jesus introduces the idea. Many of the kingdom parables, they're really short. The one that we're looking at this afternoon is just 2 sentences, but we need to understand how it all starts. In Matthew chapter 12 and verse 46 to 50, we read this, Matthew 12, 46 to 50. While Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." He replied to him, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." That's Jesus introducing the idea for us, this radical shift. All of those previous allegiances, which remain in many senses important. Jesus isn't saying we now disregard our family. He's saying there is a greater belonging for those who are outside can now become part of this heavenly family. The disciples of Jesus, the ones who are his followers, he identifies that they are the ones who belong to the kingdom of heaven. It's a radical belonging. It completely reorientates our self-centeredness, our tribalism. It shifts us and takes us to this elevated place which says that the kingdom of heaven in a way is now, if you are a disciple of Jesus. The kingdom of heaven is to come, because there will be a day when you will truly understand what it means to feast at the table. But what is the kingdom like? Well, Matthew chapter 13, 1 to 3, we start to understand how Jesus begins to unpack the story of the kingdom. That same day, the same day that he had identified the disciples as being his family, his kingdom, that same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Can you imagine this? Imagine the scene. It was a huge privilege to be able to go and to actually see Galilee. And just to imagine that on this shore, this incredibly beautiful still lake, and the country rolling hills dropping down into the water, was so packed and congested with people that such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while all the people stood on the shore. This picture of Jesus sitting in a boat, his voice traveling across this crystal clear water with a silence, people hanging on his every word. And he told them many things in parables. He grounded the idea of the kingdom of heaven, not in some highfalutin spiritual language. He said the kingdom of heaven is like things which are really rooted in the physicality and the reality of the world that we live in. The kingdom of heaven is not some spiritual, ethereal thing that is out there. It's a very physical thing, ultimately. It's a thing which can be described in terms of the things that we value inherently as people, the treasures, the things that we think of worth. And so our instincts of value, in a way, they are true, but they are disorientated. And in the same way, our instincts to hold on to this physical world are in a sense true, but they're inappropriate and they need to be redeemed into a greater understanding. And so Jesus unpacks the idea of what the kingdom of heaven is like into very, very physical, grounded, rooted, heaven on earth kind of things. And we're going to look at one of them this afternoon. Matthew chapter 13 and verse 44. It's incredibly simple. It's very short. And it says this: the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy, he went and sold all he had and bought that field. I think that's just so simple a picture. We live in a little village called Ackworth, and a number of years ago, and good number of years ago, there was somebody who was digging in their garden, and they found some ancient treasure. It's known as the Ackworth Hoard, and it was literally ancient treasure, and it was one of those remarkable moments, I guess. This particular picture, it isn't quite like that. It's something which was far more part of the cultural norm of the day. Let me describe it in this way. In the ancient world, there were no deposit boxes and banks. There was no sense of real security. Homes were made out of stone, yeah, but there was no complex locks. You could break into buildings relatively easily. You could generally break through the roof, which was kind of sticks covered in a straw and mud mesh, just to break it through. We know that story where Jesus had somebody lowered down in front of him while he was speaking to a crowd. And so during that ancient world, during that time, people routinely would bury their valuable treasure. They would bury it for a number of reasons. Perhaps they were going on a very long journey. They were leaving their home unattended. There would be some things that they might leave in their home. You know, they probably wouldn't worry too much that people were going to steal a pot or a set of cutlery or whatever it might be. But their valuables, they would very often take out, and they would dig a hole in the ground and they would bury them before they went on a long journey, maybe if they were going to be away for months. They would also bury them if they felt as though they were coming under imminent threat, if there was the threat of imminent invasion from an opposing nation. You would find that people would bury their treasure. And of course, in the ancient world, there would be many occasions where somebody would bury their treasure. They would go on a very long trip and they would never return for whatever reason. Maybe they remained in that place and forwent their treasure for the sake of where they now were. Maybe they died on the way, whatever, maybe they captured. And so the treasure would remain buried in the field. Why this man is digging in the field, we don't know, but we know that he's digging in the field and he finds treasure that is buried. It seems as though the law is fairly simple. The treasure belongs to whoever owns the field. And so the man, when he finds the treasure, you can almost picture the scene. He's digging in the field. His spade or hoe or whatever, his plough maybe, just knocks up against something solid. He investigates and he looks in and he recognizes that there's treasure that he has found. And in looking around, he recognizes that he is the only one who has found it. And so he covers up the treasure again. And he goes away and he makes it his task to go and to buy the field. There's nothing illegal in what he's doing. He buys the field, and the treasure that has been hidden in that field then belongs to him. That's simple. You see what we also identify in the reaction, in the response of the man. When the man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy, he went. To find the treasure was a joyful thing. I think there are many things that we can learn from this, but I think Jesus is writing this parable so that we might think about what the kingdom of heaven means for us as the first hearers on that shore of Galilee as Jesus spoke to them from a boat. But at the same time, Jesus is saying, I am now going to tell you this simple parable which has a timeless meaning, so that wherever we are today in the 21st century, whether you're part of Christ Church, whether you're listening live, whether you're listening on catch up, or whether you're listening from any part of the world, live or in the future, here's the thing. Jesus is telling these simple stories to prompt us so that we might think, what does it mean to understand the kingdom of heaven? And therefore, in understanding the kingdom of heaven, how might I be part of it? There are three things that I just want to draw out. First is this. In finding the hidden treasure rather, redirects the man's immediate actions. Redirects the man's immediate actions. Here he is, wherever he's digging in that field, we do not know. But immediately on finding this treasure, his actions change. He stops ploughing. He stops digging. He puts down his tools. His immediate actions are changed. Whatever he had at that moment been engaged in has become irrelevant, and he commits himself to the new task of acquiring this field. His immediate actions have been completely shifted. That is what the kingdom of heaven is like. One of the other things that Jesus says about the kingdom of heaven is that it's this multifaceted experience. It's outside of us, it's within us. It's here, it's now, it's in the future, it's to come, it's present. But one of the things that the kingdom of heaven absolutely is it is our own internal, immediate, personal experience, where we become, as we saw earlier, where we recognize that we have become disciples of Jesus, and becoming disciples of Jesus redirects our immediate actions. It reshapes what we are taken up with doing. Does that mean that suddenly we don't go to work tomorrow, or we don't do whatever is normally part of our life? Of course not. But it completely redirects the reasons by which we do those things. It reshapes why we do everything in our life. Our immediate actions are redirected when the kingdom of heaven breaks into our lives and reshapes us. The next thing that we see, that finding the hidden treasure changes the whole of his future life. Again, we're living in this story in a world which is no social security, no provision. What we have and what we can build up in terms of wealth in the immediate, our immediate family providing for us, is what is going to secure us as we get older and older. As we enter into late life and we're no longer able to provide for ourselves by working, we become reliant on what we have amassed during our lives and our reliance on our immediate family. And so what we were able to do during that time, I guess, in many ways, not that different to a pension, although we live in remarkably different times. What we are able to bring together during the present changes our future, and it was the same for this man. It changes his future life. This is an overwhelming life-changing event. That's why it becomes a source of joy, because this changes the whole of his life. I don't know what his fears were, what his concerns were, what his worries were. But what Jesus is putting his finger on is that when this treasure was found, the man's confidence for the future was completely changed. Completely changed. And that's what the kingdom of heaven does for us. It completely changes our future. It reorientates our future. It gives us a future security now. A security which it might not seem in human terms to be so secure as we might think. But when we understand that idea of the kingdom being now present in this world and future in eternity, it's a continuous thing. It's one and the same, and yet experienced in different ways. We understand that what Jesus is saying is the value of the kingdom is it changes our future security. I love the fact that Jesus describes the value of the kingdom in kind of really real earthy terms. This man has now become rich and his future is secure. But the parable breaks down because ultimately death will take this man. But the parable points us to a greater hope, which says no matter what, your future is secured. Your eternal hope is secured when you discover, when you identify, and when you recognize the value of the treasure of the kingdom. So it redirects his immediate actions. It changes the whole of his future life. And the third thing I would say is that finding the hidden treasure makes him re-evaluate his existing wealth. Do you see what he does? The man, on discovering the treasure, he buries it again and he goes out with a new course of action. But the new course of action that Jesus describes is very specific. He went out and he sold everything that he has so that he can buy that one field. That is mind-blowing as a picture. The value of the kingdom of heaven is such that it reorientates, it causes us to re-evaluate all of our existing wealth, all of those things that we hold on to, all of those things that we think are valuable. When we understand the true value of the kingdom of heaven, we realize that comparatively speaking, they are worthless. They do not compare. We can, in a way, we can treat the things that we currently value, those things that cannot be eternal, in a way that we can say they're there, but compared to the eternal value of the kingdom, I can sell them all. That's the value of the kingdom. That's how remarkably life-changing it is for you and me when we realize the value of it. We change our immediate direction, we change our future, and we re-evaluate what we currently think is of value. We've just been through a strange Christmas, but I think, like every Christmas, it reminds us that we live in a consumerist society where we want to amass things. We want to amass trinkets that speak of value. What this parable says is that the kingdom of heaven is incomparable in terms of its value compared to those things that we tend to rely on. It reminded me of something that a man called Jim Elliot said. Jim Elliot was a missionary, and he gave his life when he committed himself to sharing the gospel, sharing the good news of Jesus with a remote Amazonian tribe, and he was killed by them. He said this: "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Really, in a way, it sounds so profound what Jim Elliot said there, doesn't it? In a way, he was paraphrasing what Jesus had already said. When Jesus said this, "For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it." Will find life. How can Jesus say, if you lose your life for me, you'll find it? How can he be so sure of that? The reason he can be so sure is because he lost his life so that he might find us. That's the hope that the message of the gospel brings us. Hi, Matt.
And hello.
You all right?
Yeah, good. You?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Good. Thank you for that first session. It was really good, and yeah, really helpful. Just I think to give the context of Barack Obama, and I think that really helped in terms of that. Made me want to read the book actually. So well, I might do that.
Here's my confession. When I say read the book, it's actually an audio book, not.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah, but get this, it's 29 hours long. So
wow.
How big it must be as a it must be as a paper book, I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I wouldn't face it if it was that.
Yeah. Maybe not read it then. Maybe I'll do an audio book like you then. Is it actually narrated by him?
Yeah, it is.
Is it? All right, okay.
So it's a very easy listen. Yeah.
All right, cool. No, I might do that.
Great picture though. I thought it was an amazing picture.
Yeah. And I think it reminded me of the story, and I can't remember which one, but it says about is it the same person about the scraps under the table? Is it the one that says, you know, even I can get some of the scraps under the table? And I just think for me, that's how I feel sometimes, especially when I come into things like this, when I'm doing a message, when I'm kind of doing just different things. You think how unworthy we are. You know, we are sinful people, and if God does anything through us, it's like the scraps of the table. For me, it feels like that. You know, if God uses me in any way, then, you know, I'm so grateful for that. And that's a personal thing for me. So I found that really, really helpful. In terms of like you said about belonging and in terms of the kingdom, and obviously the scenes that we've seen, on the news and things, and it's really come to a boil, hasn't it? Everything that's gone on.
Mm.
Why is that so within us? It's about identity, isn't it? And about kind of this, we belong to this. Why is that so important? Do you think that?
I think we're actually, as human beings, we're actually made to belong to each other. The problem is, and the reason why many of us become cynical towards belonging, is that all of the contexts in which we belong in this world, they always ultimately let us down.
Yeah.
They're always ultimately led by something which doesn't quite fulfill all of those expectations. We're so tribal. We're so unable to bridge that gap between us and people who are not like us. And that's one of the amazing things I think about the kingdom of heaven, is that the kingdom of heaven, if you think about it, it's worldwide. It's drawing people from every cultural experience, every cultural framework of thinking, every time-phased way of thinking. So across millennia, people are brought together, and ultimately the kingdom will be experienced in people who have massively diverse perspectives, and yet we are one in Jesus Christ, and that draws us into this sense of oneness. So he becomes the way in which we reconcile. And that's the problem with world kingdoms, is that ultimately we have to be reconciled because my way of thinking is reconciled to your way of thinking, or your way of thinking is reconciled to my way of thinking. And actually the way in which the kingdom of heaven works is no. Both of your ways of thinking are reconciled to Jesus' way of thinking.
Yeah. So in terms of that, what do you think it does to a people when that is the case? We haven't got, in terms of, for me, it removes that that cause of division, I suppose, in terms of, and I know you can say Christianity has caused a lot of division, and that's kind of another thing, but in terms of kind of the kingdom, that division of, we are all, me and you, we're the same, our ways of thinking may be completely wrong, but we are going by Jesus and what he has done and who he is.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus came and brought division. Let's be honest, Jesus came and brought division. But the way in which he brought division was ultimately by him being willing to be killed for those who disagreed with him. So ultimately he brings a division which is totally servant-hearted, but ultimately triumphant and victorious as well. So the very way in which he appeared to be defeated, the very way in which the kingdom appeared to be crushed, is actually the way in which the kingdom is forged. And I think the other thing that the kingdom does is, for every one of us, it does two things. There are senses, there are ways in which we think, which need to be crushed. And so the message of Jesus breaking into our heart confronts us, challenges us, and breaks us down so that we would be conformed to him. But there's other ways in which all of us, in our own ways, are also broken, because that inner made in the image of God experiences that we crave after are not fulfilled. And the kingdom of heaven comes to nurture and to implant those desired for experiences as well. So it does both of those things. It confronts us and changes us, and it nurtures us. And every culture and every people group will have differing ways in which they need to be confronted and nurtured.
Of course.
And that's the way in which our different perspectives ultimately become reconciled in Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. It looks different, and we've got to, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine for it to look different. And that's the amazing thing about the church, isn't it? It's a global, it's global. It could be every tribe and tongue and nation, and it's an amazing thing. So we talk about the kingdom, we talk about it's multifaceted and everything, which is amazing. If we look at the situation kind of we find ourselves in, we're saying, well, the kingdom's not tangible. I feel like that person who's getting food from the scraps of the table, but I don't feel in the kingdom. I feel kind of just isolated, alone, not with people. And it's really easy to feel like that, isn't it? To feel kind of.
I think this parable really points to that as well. If you imagine, we don't know. I mean, it's a parable, so we can't push the idea too hard.
No.
But what the man wasn't able to do, he wasn't able to immediately acquire the field. He had to go away and he had to sell all of his current possessions. There's a space of time between him knowing and finding the kingdom and truly experiencing the kingdom. There's a gap. And that, I think we are living in the gap more than the experience of the gap, possibly more than we ever have done.
Yeah.
Because our ability to gather together, our ability to worship together, gives us little flavors, little experiences of what the kingdom will be like ultimately. And so when we are cut off from that and we're relying on the best that we can do with streaming, and it's better than nothing, when we are doing that, we're living very much in that gap. We're living in the experience of the man. And what we need to do then is remind ourselves that we have found a future treasure. We need to kind of, I think it was Lloyd Jones who said one of the things that we need to do at times is we need to preach to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. We need to remind ourselves that the kingdom is a future value. And the man knows, he absolutely knows that if he sells everything and buys that field, he has a treasure. That's how secure the kingdom is for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that he reorientates his life, that he completely changes direction.
Yeah.
Someone watching this and they're thinking, well, I don't really want to change direction, to be honest. I'm interested in this. I'm interested in this kind of kingdom talk. I'm interested in, but to completely reorientate, to sell everything, and obviously we're not saying sell everything, but I just wonder, just as we draw to a close, we can speak a little bit into that and saying, what could that look like for us today?
I think one of the things that I would say with regards to that is maybe the reason that you're interested, maybe the reason that you're looking on to this is because you know that there is a treasure that you do not yet possess. There is something that you experience, that you know deep down inside, that you look on at the value of this message of hope and you value it to a way that but you are confronted with the idea that is it valuable enough to let go of the things that I think are of current value. And that's the step of faith. And actually it's the journey of faith, because we don't actually go and sell all of our possessions. We don't let go of those things that we value at day one.
No.
We learn little by little to have our fingers gently peeled off the things that we value, and at times prized off the things that we value. And we begin to realize over time. So it's faith. It's saying, I would say, trust. Believe that the bigger hope is worth exposing yourself to letting go of the things that you think are of current value.
Yeah, it reminds me of that. It's we've used it plenty of times. The example that Tim Keller says about falling, and then you kind of have to reach, and just having trust and faith in that thing will hold you, kind of thing. Not the fact that it's all about you. It's the thing that's going to hold you, and it's really doing that. So no, thank you, Paul.
And it's a battle. It's a battle to come to that. But the reality is, we're battling in life anyway.
Absolutely.
And so, which battle do we want? Do we want a battle which is coming to understand that hope, or do we want a battle without hope?
Yeah, absolutely. And then let me just say, guys, this is something which is continual, and you're not going through it alone. It's something which contact us if you want to be involved in a life group, speak to one of the pastoral team. We are going through times which are really tough, but we have a hope which outlasts them all. And yeah, that's what this is about, and we'll continue to proclaim that. So thank you, Paul. That's great. Hope everyone has a good week and gets ready for the next installment of our series next week. Hope you have just a blessed time. And yeah, have a great week.
Take care. Bye, everybody.